important stuff.
Okay, so we're going to move to the presidential debate right now. Each candidate will have an opening statement of 3 minutes. There'll be a general question for each candidate. Then we'll have some, again, candidate-specific questions before moving back into kind of more general questions and questions from you guys in the audience. Just a reminder to candidates to answer the questions as specifically as possible, to keep it concise and to make sure you get all of your points across clearly. So we can begin with.
And you all have 2 45-second rebuttals. Use them wisely. And just a reminder to the crowd, be respectful when they're talking. So try not to interrupt people.
So Sarah, was that good?
Hi, I'm Sarah Armstrong, and I'm running for YCC president because I love Yale. This place is honestly more like a home than a school to me, and the people here have made it just an incredible experience. So why I want to be president is because I want to make the best Yale experience for the people that I love here. I want to start by clarifying what YCC actually is, though. YCC is not a policy-making body, it's an advocacy body. Everyone on the stage has met with administrators. We've all created policy, but a lot of that policy has fallen through the cracks in the YCC process. This election is really about who has been and will continue to be the most effective in getting the administration to take tangible action that reaches the student body. A little background on me, my biggest activities here have been student government and then social justice organizations. So I've been really involved in Dwight Hall. I'm a campus leader for Unite Against Sexual Assault at Yale. And I'm also sophomore class president. I actively chose not to run for YCC last year and instead ran for class council so that I could affect the lives of students more directly and creatively. I noticed that the most powerful momentum for change at this school comes from student groups that are closest to the issues. For example, as we learned today, Yale is beginning to divest from fossil fuels, which is amazing and a perfect example of effective student advocacy. So the reason my platform is on supporting student advocates is because I want to eliminate the bureaucratic systems and structures of YCC and streamline the process of students reaching the administration. If Yale is a place that's for everyone, the people who actually make important progress at this school have to have access to the people who make policy. And let me be clear, I'm confident in the policy that I'm proposing. I want a more inclusive, intersectional, and respectful sexual climate at Yale. I want cultural diversity in the undergraduate curriculum and in student life. I want to support economic diversity by eliminating the student income contribution. We need to expand LGBT resources and have inclusive mental health services for people of color. And we need better accommodations for students with disabilities and a stronger support for community service initiatives. I have policy that will accomplish these goals. And not only that, I have experience in getting the administration to take action. For example, this year, instead of writing lengthy policy proposals, I wrote a 1-page business pitch, gave it to YCC first, and they told me that it would never happen. And then I took it straight to the administration, and it happened right away. And I got $20,000 for a really great event. That's the role of YCC, working proactively with student groups to get action from the administration. It's what I've done this year, it's what I'll continue to do as YCC president, and that's why I feel I deserve your vote.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Diksha Brombat. I'm a sophomore in Berkeley College and I'm obviously also running for YCC president. The reason why I want to run is because I have a genuine commitment and care for the people around me, the Yale community, and I recognize that there's so many different communities within Yale that make up the greater community. And not only have I had leadership experiences, which I'll mention, but I've felt on the other side of the power spectrum. I am a low-income student who works 13 hours a week. I also see a counselor at Yale Mental Health and Counseling after actually facing a lot of difficulties with myself and obstacles getting there, facing stigma. I'm a woman of color who sought out the AACC, the South Asian Society, last semester amidst all the conversations going on, and I was affected. I was deeply affected. I've seen my friends be affected by so many different issues that affect us on a daily level. In terms of experience, I've really tried to engage myself in the Yale community, representing Berkeley College on the freshman class council, this year on the Yale College Council, working with New Haven and Yale relationships and trying to find out ways that we can form partnerships and meaningful interactions outside of the great work that Dwight Hall already does in terms of community service. I've also organized a huge conference in the Civic Leadership Initiative, working with administrators, working with Dean Holloway's office, working with Peter Crumlish of Dwight Hall, and working with an alum, Eric Liu, to put together this initiative and really plan something that's student organized. And I also want to run because I understand that this position will help me do what I want to do and convey the voices of people around me. I've already met with Joe so many times and continuously meeting with him to find out what YCC can do and what the president's role is. And there are three things with that. Connecting student groups to administration, meaning that when I go into meetings with administrators, I need to have whatever issue that we're discussing that day, I need to have a representative in a student group that's already organizing around this and have them in that room and give them that face time so they don't always play ping pong with administration. Number two, connecting administrators to the student body. A huge problem is that we have reports, but obviously not everyone reads them. So we need to have administrators come onto campus and educate us, not just through an email or a newsletter, but be in a room and explain to us what they're working on and how we can actually have a role in that. And three, connecting student groups with each other and to the Yale College Council, because I think there's lots of power in conversations that have already been going on and work that has already been done, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel every time. We need to harness the power more effectively of these student organizations and get the task force model that already exists in the YCC and apply that to the direct projects that reps are working on, so that all the representatives, when relevant, are working with student groups who have way more knowledge on these issues, and so that they are connected every day.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Carter Hellshine, and I'm a sophomore in Morse College. Now, first, I want to address the importance of humor in a campaign and announce that I'm running for YCC president. I want you guys to be the first who realize this, so you guys can go home and tell your friends today. So let's understand the importance of humor. I want to engage the 50% of the Yale body who do not care at all about politics. It's not you guys. It's everyone else out there. It's so many people who aren't here tonight, who are not going to watch this video, who just do not care about the important issues. Why? Because they're exhausted, they're overwhelmed, they're tired of it, they'll know other people will take care of it. Now, this is a problem. But this is why our campaign is working. This is why humor is making people get excited about this again. This is why people are coming up to me, joining the campaign. This is why people, for the past 4 days, have come up to me in a dining hall and they've said, Carter, we love your campaign. I was getting chicken tenders, so I was pretty pissed that they were interrupting me. But they said, we love your campaign. And people have told me they're getting excited and they're reading our real platform under More Platform on our website. They're reading these issues. Guys, this is what matters right now. Sarah said it perfectly. YCC is an advocacy body. What does that mean? That means you need to have someone who can sell something, who can sell an idea. This summer, I worked all summer, broke a sales record selling AT&T. That's a product. As long as we're not selling Comcast here, I'm good. I can sell an idea. And that's what the point of YCC is. Who am I? I'm someone who's worked with administrators in every single role I have on campus. This morning, I was talking to Joanne at the financial aid office. I'm on full financial aid. I was not there campaigning. I was talking to her personally. I'm on a first-name basis with her. I'm very good friends with Bob Sullivan. Why? Because he's the dad of my sweet mate, Kevin Sullivan. I worked with administrators. Dean Holloway is on a first-name basis with me. Why? Because I'm a cool guy. The point being, as employment director for No Closed Doors, I have personally used humor to bridge the gap and build rapport with people who are homeless, who don't have jobs, and help them get excited and get those jobs. As politic treasurer, I went through our entire magazine base dating back to the 1940s, and I went through and found a database of every single alumni we have, and I created that database. We need to work with alumni more. Flat out, you look at something like the student income contribution, something that I care very personally about. Why has that not been eliminated? Because alumni say we need to have skin in the game. That's fair, that's fine. What do we need to do? We need to share the personal stories, like my own. I work 14 hours a week. It is a significant hamper on me. We need to share the personal stories of the people who go to mental health. Something that has affected me my freshman year is a very personal issue to me. You should not have to wait 4 months to get an appointment at mental health. That's unacceptable. And we're not going to let that happen, I guarantee you. Thank you so much.
My name is Josh. I'm a sophomore at Berkeley, and I'm running for YCC president because I want to make Yale a more equitable and accountable place. Last fall, we saw quite apparently that there is racial inequity on this campus. And this spring, we saw that we do not have an ideal sexual climate. And as a white male on this campus, I cannot profess to have felt the pain and frustration that some of our peers felt last semester. But I listened really hard as I could, and I tried my best to understand. And I've translated that listening and those conversations into fierce advocacy. I have advocated to administrators like the Dean for Undergraduate Education for Ethnic Studies. And I've had conversations with advocates for Latinx Studies and for Asian American Studies to expand ethnic studies to create a new special academic program in ethnic studies. I've translated that listening into actual action. And I am best equipped, uniquely equipped, to continue that advocacy as YCC president. I have led a council, the Freshman Class Council, and helped plan memorable events like the Freshman Dance and Freshman Olympics. And this year, I've served as Academic Policy Director, where I've advocated to deans like Dean Holloway and like the Dean for Undergraduate Education. I've advocated to change our Credit D Fail deadline so that we have more time to decide which classes we want to designate Credit D Fail. As president, I want YCC to be a constructive partner for campus groups by providing administrative access and ensuring successful implementation of a lot of the policies that campus groups really have desired. My platform is one of equity, accountability, and community. And as president, I will emphasize equity. I think it's time that YCC takes on issues of racial equity, that we more robustly support the cultural centers and expand ethnic studies as I've tried to advocate for this year. I think it's time that YCC takes on creating a positive sexual climate by increasing Title IX coordinators and also by clarifying the informal complaint process. I think it's time that we continue the work of the LGBTQ task force by finally creating an LGBTQ student center. I think it's time that we finally push for the elimination of the student income contribution, but also realize that's going to take persistent advocacy and take steps in the meantime to improve the condition of students on financial aid before that eventual elimination. I am no stranger to advocacy. I've done it. I'm no stranger to listening to students. My platform is not just my ideas. It's the product of conversations I've had for the last month with students all across campus. And I'm no stranger to actually achieving policy results. And as YCC president, I will do those three things once again.
And lastly, Peter, and if you're at the door, feel free to come in.
I kind of want to take the first few seconds of my 3 minutes to do a quick plug. If y'all haven't read Carter's book, read Carter's book. It's super funny.
My mom endorses it.
Also, I just want to recognize all 5 of us on the stage. We've been really close friends. Well, at least from my perspective. I hope we all have the same perspective. Since the fall of freshman year, and we've all been in the student government rat race, if you call it, since freshman year. But let me get on. My name is Peter Hua. I'm a sophomore in Silliman. I'm running to be your 2016 student government president. And so, I have a couple questions that I'll rhetorically ask you don't need to answer, and I'll answer them for you. So, why do I want to run for student government? Because I have a vision for student government. I think instead of just listening to student government groups, student government should actively connect with student groups, work with them on campus issues that actually matter. The second part, everyone's talking about this, and I will also talk about this, because we're not harping on the point for political gain. We actually think this is super important. In the first semester, we saw a lot of things happen on campus that affected different demographics differently, and also affected people of color differently, but I just don't appreciate the fact that student government was not present in those conversations. Did we try? I think to a certain extent, yes, but definitely not as hard as we should have. So what is my experience with student government? I was the first semester chair of the Freshman Class Council, and in the second semester, I got to join on as associate member. In my associate member term, I started my work of connecting directly with student groups. I work with a lot of tech groups on campus, Hack Yale, YHack, Boot, Float, to work directly with them to understand what their issues are and to connect them with each other. I held meetings with them inside of BASC in the lower level. If you've ever been there, it's kind of depressing, but they were fine with it. Moving on, this year I worked under Hawk. Hawk is the academics director. I also worked in the academics department. And for my distributional credits project, which is basically looking at how many students felt about science credits, how science students felt about humanities credits, I met with a lot of different student groups, the Undergraduate Aerospace Association to the International Students Organization. So again, I want to work with student groups. Outside of student government, I'm the intercultural liaison for the Asian American Students Alliance. I'm also part of the Asian American Studies Task Force. So I have very direct hands-on experience with what it means to work with cultural groups on campus. Next question. What are some of my ideas for next year? I want to work very, very closely with the student groups on campus, especially the cultural groups, to address faculty diversity. And to make that less vague, I want a student government group, 5 or 6 students, I don't really care about the number, working directly with student groups, to research every single department inside of Yale academics, understand what the tenure support system is like, retention, and also once those problems come up and we understand them, work with student groups, cultural groups to address those problems and propose solutions. What sets me apart from all these other candidates? I focused these 2 years exclusively on working with student groups. I'm very passionate about it. I understand about cultural groups very well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So now we will have a general question for you all to answer. You'll have 1 minute to respond. So YCC has implemented, as you all know, several internal structural changes this year. As the president of YCC, you would be determining the trajectory of the organization. Please explain one specific change that you would like to keep and one that you would like to change. And why? And we'll start with Disha.
Okay. So one thing that I really believe in the power of and that I would like to keep is Joe's and his entire team's incredible work on the task force system. I think that's a very tangible way of bringing in people who have experience in these issues, who've already organized around these issues and who are part of these student groups, and bringing them in to have actual connection and say in whatever student government does. And in line with that, what I really want to focus on in changing that is bringing that and that culture of connection and that culture of actively seeking out partnerships and going to your friend who is on USAY or who is working at the Women's Center and saying, listen, I'm working on this, I need you to work with me on this, and educate me so that I can better even inform the council and have you there. So I think that task force model needs to be brought to all of the projects that our representatives are working on, so they have a commitment, accountability, and they have someone to answer to and engage with, so that these projects aren't falling through cracks and only resulting in presentations in the council.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
All my notes are actually on Greece's austerity measures, but I'll try to handle this one. So first of all, Joe has been a great leader to learn from, and the task force model he set up, I'll echo, has been fantastic. Why? Because it pinpoints and it targets key areas. This all brings me back to the fact that we are, as a YCC, not functioning and not visible. We need to bring imagination back to it. How do you do that? You do that by empowering the student groups. That's a cliche phrase. What does it mean? Good question, Artem. What empowering the student groups means is we need to assign individuals, representatives, there are 24, to the cultural centers. They should be working, and we need to assign a large student council that each of the cultural centers will be a part of, and student groups will be a part of, because that's how you have effective leadership when they're talking together. Because quite frankly, last semester, that change happened to the student body. I'm trying to re-engage and reinvigorate the student body, because quite frankly, tobacco for Yale and changing a cover photo to a survey is not going to cut it anymore, guys.
So one positive development institutionally that the YCC is implemented this year is our new endowment. I think that's really important for us, mainly because it creates a sense of financial independence from the university. In fact, I think it's time that the cultural centers have endowments as well, so that they're financially independent from the university. But one change that I would make is I would definitely want to create freshman representative positions on the council. I think this year, the way that we have harnessed the freshman class is through the associate representative system, where for most of the freshmen who are in YCC, in which they don't actually vote on policy, but they can actually perform policy. I think it's time that we have freshmen on the council to represent their class, who collaborate with the freshman class council, but actually have voting power. And to address the point about the liaison system, I think my skepticism with that is that I think we probably don't have enough members of the YCC to liaise with all the student groups at Yale. I also think it might be a problem if we have members of the YCC who are not representative of the groups they might be liaising with. And so I think that's something that we have to take into account. And instead, the main priority should be making YCC into an actual representative body.
Can I rebuttal to that one? Okay, so to that specific one, which is a very good rebuttal to make. So the representatives who would be assigned to the cultural centers, there aren't that many cultural centers. We have 24 representatives, so that's going to work out. That's an extremely good point about the representation of the people who are with that council. That's something that logistically, numbers-wise, is quite frankly a true point, but this is overcoming the issue, guys. We have 24 people on the YCC who are not as informed, not as educated about the issues that we are advocating on. We receive a report, we receive statistics, and then we're supposed to vote on that issue. The cultural centers, the student groups, they're the people with the passion. They're the people who are excited. They're the people who got change done last semester. While YCC, we tried to funnel that through administration. We got roadblocked because they're the ones who understand the issues. That's what we're trying to do with that.
Peter?
I want to echo what Carter said. I think one of the positive reforms that we have made this year is Joe started a task force system. And the reason the task force system is very successful is you have 6 or 7 students working on a very large issue on campus that's very relevant to a specific demographic of students. For example, there's LGBTQ task force and there's also the Greek life task force. Now, I kind of want to take this task force system and just implement throughout the entire student government. That's my one change that I would like to make. I don't believe that 24 separate different projects or 24 representatives on small issues around campus is going to make an impact on student groups. And so I think, although this will decrease the number of projects, I would like to remind you 24 members is not all we have. We have many, many associates. And again, those associates can also help us on projects. I don't want to focus on a million different projects and have a million different projects put on the shelf. I want to focus on 6 or 7 very relevant issues that a lot of students on campus care about through talking with them and working with them and making sure those projects are actually completed and not sitting on the shelf.
So I think the endowment can be a very good thing. I would answer endowment as a positive thing, though I don't think it's been used as it should. YCC has a lot of internal events that are very fun for YCC members, but I would really like to see that YCC money being used for a cultural inclusion workshop or a sexual climate workshop, or it just could be allocated a lot better instead of like a fancy YCC party. So I think the endowment's a really good thing, and I'd like to say that as my good thing for YCC, but I would like to see it used in a different way. And with that, for my change for YCC, I think it's really important that we start reaching out to student leaders who are actually creating the change on campus, because as we saw from last semester that we keep referencing, it was not YCC who got the administration's attention, which is weird because YCC is the people who meets with the administration all the time. So I would like to see YCC bringing in student groups and student leaders, whether that be from USAY or BSAY, or the groups that are actually creating momentum and connecting them directly with the administration.
Great, thank you.
So now we're going to move to some candidate-specific questions. Candidates have 2 minutes to answer these questions. So we'll start with Carter. Carter, you're the only presidential candidate who has not openly supported a $15 minimum wage for all on-campus jobs. Can you please explain your reasoning and what are the steps you might take to make the student work requirement more reasonable?
Sure. Thank you for asking me that. We should grab a meal sometime. Restart the timer. So this is a very good question. This is important because there's a lot of confusion on campus. I was talking to Joanne today about this in the financial aid office, and I was also talking to people in La Casa today about this, people who are low income, like myself. To give you guys background, I'm on full financial aid. I work 14 hours a week as a student tech. I work very hard. The student income contribution impacts me. I want to eliminate that. Here's why, though, and this is a very confusing issue, why I'm against the general broad term that has been proposed in the survey of just giving students only, not Yale employees, the $15 income contribution. These are people with families. These are people who we think we're better than to receive this amount of money, a higher wage. That's my first issue with it. Second is I was talking about the endowment earlier with her. You have a quarter of the endowment that is going to fixed issues. You have 3% is going to textbooks. You have 7% that is going to maintenance. These are hard numbers, and then alumni give very fixed sets amount of money of where this money can be used for. Before we began campaigning, we had to go to an endowment meeting, and we learned some very interesting information for why it's so tricky to use the endowment money. So that argument that we have so much money to give students for is, you can throw it out. So where does that money come from if we were to raise the student wage? Well, it would quite frankly come from things that are very near and dear to me and other low-income students, and that are grants and fellowships and scholarships. This is stuff that we depend on, and dollar for dollar, you can do the math, and I'd be happy to explain to you this more and break it down for you. Dollar to dollar, it's actually more effective, and Tyler Blackman agreed with me on this when I talked to him about it. It's more effective to not raise the minimum wage and instead increase that amount. That is a proposal I am for. I quite frankly feel like everyone on this stage was pressured into signing that survey and did not think it through clearly. This is a problem that's in YCC. Real briefly, YCC votes. I've been a member on YCC for 2 years. The amount of people I've seen abstain from a vote, the amount of people I've seen pressured into a vote who didn't really believe in something is unacceptable, guys. And that's just something I'm not going to stand for. Thank you guys very much.
Josh, as president, you pledged to get a student on the Yale Corporation. What specific policy areas does the Yale Corporation oversee, and how would your student membership priority, or your proposal for student membership tangibly affect your policy priorities?
So we've seen over the last couple of years that the Yale Corporation often decides on issues that are of particular pertinence to students. A couple of years ago, they talked about fossil fuel divestment. This year, in the near future, they're going to be deciding on names for the residential colleges and also the term master. These are questions that we have really deliberated on a lot as students, and oftentimes we don't even have a justification from the Yale Corporation about why they make a particular decision. I think the first step before we get a student on the Yale Corporation is we at least increase the frequency of meetings that the YCC and student activists have with the Yale Corporation. As it currently stands, the YCC leadership meets with the Yale Corporation in April. That's when the new leadership leaves. That's when the old leadership leaves and the new leadership comes in. And so the corporation doesn't want to meet with us until the people they're meeting with are on their way out. That is unacceptable. I also think it's time, before we add a student representative, that the Yale Corporation meets with student leaders who are doing activism about the areas the corporation is doing work. So a couple of years ago, for instance, the corporation should have met much more frequently with Fossil Free Yale. And this year, the corporation should be meeting much more frequently with student leaders of color, particularly in Next Yale. Now, to get a student on the Yale Corporation, it's going to take some time. It's another example of one of those issues that will take persistent advocacy, like eliminating the student income contribution. But that doesn't mean it's something that we should shy away from. It means it's something that we should take a couple of years to actually accomplish. And what it will take at first is meeting with Dean Holloway to really express our view about the need for a student on the Yale Corporation. Compile a report on student representation at other universities and how effective it is when students are on the Yale Corporation. And I think that once we do that and we meet with members of the Yale Corporation like Margaret Marshall, Gina Raimondo, we'll be able to convey to them the necessity of doing that. But only after we increase the frequency they have with student leaders so that they realize the value that exists in talking to students. It's not just a nuisance for them, it could actually enrich their decision making.
Getting a student on the Yale Corporation was a policy platform of a candidate last year, and it consistently comes up as one of those flashy policy ideas. It is also something that's really symbolic of YCC putting forward proposals that don't get accomplished in a year and kind of forgotten about. To actually put a student on the Yale Corporation, Yale has to amend its whole constitution. They'd have to put an undergrad, someone from the div school, the law school, every branch of Yale. And there's an ACIR, they advise the CCIR, which then advises the Yale Corporation. It took Fossil Free Yale 2.5 months to get a meeting with the ACIR, the group that advises the Yale Corporation. I think we need more Yale Corporation transparency, but to go straight to, we have to have a student on the Yale Corporation won't actually help anyone. I think we need to fight for the transparency.
Josh,
So the first thing I'll say is that getting a student on the Yale Corporation would not be unprecedented based on the practice of other universities. There is student representation at other universities. And so this is not something, as I said before, that we should shy away from. But I also think that our platform should be realistic, but also aspirational. I don't think that what we're talking about right now should be restricted to what we can achieve in 1 year. If that were the case, then there would never be any change to financial aid, because what happens in 1 year is not exactly what happened this year with financial aid. Like, the reforms that we accomplished this year with Dean Storlazzi took a lot of time. And if we restricted our platforms to what could be accomplished in 1 year, that would never have happened. And so we have to be thinking towards the future and lay the groundwork with persistent advocacy. And so while my platform is realistic, I divide my platform into what YCC can do and Yale should do. I think we should also be aspirational and focus on what we can do in the future as well.
As president, you pledged to continue to work with Yale health administrators to improve the quality of mental health resources. Can you please describe what specifically you would like to improve, and which administrators you would work with to make such improvements?
Of course. So these administrators are very hard to reach out to, but obviously the two names I always hear of is Dean Jennison and also Ms. Siggins. So definitely those two administrators, if we did want to implement massive, widespread programming in Yale Health, are the administrators that student government needs to work with. To respond to the question of what specifically I do envision, I don't want to make any flashy policy proposals, but at the end of the day, if you think about it, I do at the very first, I do want to meet with all the student groups on campus who do work on mental health issues. So Mind Matters, and you also have a lot of other groups that focus on just activities of reducing stress. For example, you have the Yale Undergraduate Mindfulness Education Initiative. Do they work on policy? No, but they do try to improve the campus by offering meditation workshops. And I think at the end of the day, these activities aren't promoted as heavily because these groups don't have the ability to communicate with the massive, widespread student population. So it's not specifically a policy proposal, but I do want to I want student government and also other student groups such as Mind Matters to meet directly with Dean Jennison just to convince him, hey, can you implement a program where all the psychiatrists, all the psychologists in Yale Health have an understanding of what student groups exist on campus? Because yes, this is also going back to the point that we do have restricted resources. So we have so many psychiatrists, so many psychologists. If students meet with them, they can't meet with them every single day, or at least not as often as they would like. So I would like to see the supplementary programming that student groups offer on their own free time, of their own free volition, being advertised through Yale Health. Will this solve everything? I definitely think not, but I do think we should try to look at promoting student groups on campus. The students that do work on campus for mental health, they are very passionate about what they do. They understand a lot about what they do. For example, Mind Matters invites a lot of different speakers to come to campus to speak on what it means to feel stressed, what it means to deal with depression. And so if you have these events on campus, and Yale Health administrators and Yale Health psychologists and psychiatrists promote those in addition to treating students, I think you have a comprehensive approach, at least more comprehensive than right now.
Sarah, you talk a lot about faculty diversity in your platform. What role do you think the YCC president has in this conversation? And similarly, you talk about increasing the role of student input in faculty retention procedures. How do you perceive this happening?
Yeah, so when we go to YCC to kind of advocate for these really important diversity initiatives, I think there's a misconception that YCC is in charge of hiring faculty or something like that. YCC's role is to advocate to the administration what is the priority of the student body. Student groups this year have made very clear that diversity initiatives are extremely important to our student body, and I don't think that the faculty is unaware that having a diverse faculty is enriching to our learning experience. So I would say that the way I would advocate to increase faculty diversity is to bring in the groups that have been pushing for this for years, and that is all of the cultural houses and all of their affinity groups, and get them in those meetings with the administrators and have just more accountability to pushing through the policy proposals that these student groups have been advocating for again and again and again, and it's YCC's responsibility to link them together.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea, Sarah, but I also think we do need to add more concrete face to it. I have 45 seconds, correct? Okay. So I just through the Asian American Studies Task Force, I have understood that meeting with certain deans isn't going to give you everything immediately. It does take time. And at the end of the day, you do get ping-ponged around. So the Deputy Provost for Faculty Diversity and Development, Dean Brisby-Askis, he told us to contact the deans of individual academic departments directly to try to advocate for it. So even he, the Deputy Provost for Faculty Diversity and Development, doesn't really have this power. So you do need to understand, I think, just within each department, what retention and what hiring problems there are. I think that's the first step. I don't think we should immediately advocate and push for something without understanding what the problems are and without bringing solutions brought from the cultural groups and the cultural centers.
Sure. Yeah, so I met with the Native American Cultural Center, amazing community on campus. I also met with YASA, the Yale African Student Association. There are certain demographics that are grossly underrepresented in the faculty. There's one Native faculty member in the state of Connecticut. There's one Native mental health resource person. That's insane, and I think it's understanding the demographics that are most underrepresented in the student body and letting the administration know that, because they're getting people advocating for all sorts of different things, and if we let them know, we need more Native faculty, we need more African faculty, we need more resources for Latin American studies classes, and tell them specifically what we're pushing for, then that'll get their attention.
Okay, so this question is today. You mentioned in your platform, our sexual climate and handling of sexual misconduct clearly need our collective attention and effort. The Women's Center and UCA already host awareness and educational events and programs, but not all of us take initiative to attend. YCC needs to better facilitate those conversations and help translate them into concrete steps to bring Stephanie Swagel. So what specific steps or policy initiatives would you pursue as president?
Okay, one thing, thank you for asking. One thing that I think is really big is that a lot of these events with UCA Women's Center, they really make great efforts to reach out to a large student body, like making these Facebook events and getting people together in a room. But the problem is, I keep seeing the same faces there again and again, and it becomes a niche community. And I think sometimes the problem is that people don't feel a commitment or don't feel compelled to go to these events until they've kind of faced it themselves. And the problem there comes that you don't have the resources or understanding very accessible and kind of common cultural knowledge in order to access those resources. So I think one big thing is really focusing on transparency, bringing in David Post from the UWC, bringing in Stephanie Spangler and having bigger town halls and connection points where students can actually go to these events. And YCC can help facilitate the publicity for that so that there is this common understanding on campus that these are issues that not only the people compelled to attend these events should be engaging in. These are things that we all need to take advantage of, and these are all things that we need to have resources and sheets in all these residential colleges and have these resources very accessible in dining halls, and have freshmen, as they're coming in, be very aware of working with the CCEs in order to have these resources up front right away.
So I think definitely conversations are important. YCC is a body that facilitates conversations, but the YCC president has to really have a degree of policy depth to go into a room with an administrator and really know exactly what to be advocating for institutionally. And so I have a couple proposals that I think we should add and kind of direct this conversation towards policy and not just institutional things. One is increasing the number of Title IX coordinators that we have. We have a ratio of 5,000 students to one Title IX coordinator at Yale. At professional schools, we have 300 to 1. We need to really clarify what the informal complaint process is so that students are more open to actually going through and talking to somebody about a case of sexual misconduct. We have to make sure that UWC keeps to its deadlines, but is also flexible in times of academic stress. And we also have to make sure that a lot of these resources are corresponding to students with a 24-hour deadline. We need to talk not just structurally, but also institutionally.
And one thing to add to that, in terms of just people even, and students who are victims of sexual assault, being able to access that and even reach those kinds of policies that are in place and the people that are in place to facilitate that kind of process, is one big thing is an online resource and an online platform that's already being worked on with Dean Melanie Boyd and someone on council, to have this kind of website to really be built in where we use social media, we use websites that it's very clear that you can go onto this and have it very accessible, very easy to file a complaint and have the steps and resources right there. So not only are we increasing that on the other side, but making sure that students are aware and use those resources and can file that.
Thank you. So now we'll move to our second general question from the candidates. What is unique about the role of the president in the upper levels of YCC leadership, and what have you done to familiarize yourself with the role, its responsibilities, and past successes and failures, as well as its contact with the administrators? And I'd like to emphasize the last part of that question specifically. And we will start with Josh.
So this past year, I served on the executive board of YCC. I served as the academic policy director. And so I worked up close with administrators like Dean Holloway, advocating for policies that were important to the student body. And so I believe that one of the primary responsibilities of the president of the YCC is agenda setting. As Sarah pointed out aptly before, we are a policy advocacy organization, not a policy implementation organization. And so the first thing that the president has to do is decide what the priorities are in a particular year. And one concern that I've had this year is that our priorities at the YCC are not completely aligned with the priorities of the student body. And so next year, I want to make that alignment. And so what we need to do is add racial equity and creating a positive sexual climate to that list of priorities. Now, being on the executive board, I have helped set the agenda of YCC. I've gone into meetings with Dean Schirmeister to talk about ethnic studies, with Dean Holloway to talk about credit defail. I know what it means to go into that meeting and having to have a set of arguments, but also knowing that sometimes you have to kind of meet the administrators halfway, but also stand very firm.
I would like to mention before I make my next statement that it's not that I don't believe meeting with administration is unimportant, but I don't believe that is the role of the student government body president. I believe that the role of student government body president is to meet with student groups, to understand what their concerns are. Because when you're in a room with an administrator and you're trying to push for something that you heard from some other group, I think it would be way more beneficial for you to bring that group directly into the office. That doesn't mean we should bring every single student who wants to talk about everything, but definitely bring, for example, we do want to work on ethnic studies, working very closely with the culture groups, asking the presidents to come and meet with us, discussing it, and then bringing those students into a room, not to attack the administrator, but to have those groups speak directly to the administrator. Because if you're walking into a room and you're talking about issues that students care about, I think first of all, you need to have a very, very good understanding of what students care about. And I think it's kind of weird to say that you understand what students care about enough to express them for them, when instead you can just bring them into a room. So I think, at the end, to summarize, the role of the student government body president is to meet with student groups.
So I've met with a lot of student groups to form my policy, so has everyone else. I've met with many, many administrators. We've all been in student government the entire time we've been at Yale. I think what's lacking is the connection between all those meetings and the student body actually seeing results. I feel like a lot of people in this room can't think of a time when YCC has really affected their Yale experience, and that's a problem. So I don't want to show off like all the meetings I've been to and policy reports I've written, because if you don't see any tangible action, then it doesn't matter. And I'm the only person on this stage that has actually gotten results from the administration and gotten funds allocated closer to student government. And I think that is the role of the student body president here. It's to be able to effectively pitch an idea and get the administration to respond to it, because usually it's just a survey, it's just a conversation, it's just a report, and it's not action, but that's the role of the government.
Yes, Sarah. Yes.
Oh,
I'd like to make a rebuttal. Sarah, I don't think that's quite fair to say you're the only one in this board or in this panel who's been able to achieve change. I do want to recognize that all 5 of us right up here, we have tried our hardest, especially Josh. He's the one who's been meeting with administration the most, so he understands the general bureaucratic red tape. So I don't think that's fair. I do want to recognize that there are long-term projects and short-term projects. For long-term projects, you will not immediately see results, and I think it is still important to recognize that student government does do work. For example, Joe has tried super hard. You might not hear much about what he does, but he has put in the work. I think that can be said the same about all of us. But I do want to make the caveat, there are long-term projects, but in the short term, those are policy things, right? But in the short term, we can also focus on programming. And to explain that, for example, that's my mental health psychiatrist telling students about student groups.
So for myself, I really tried to understand what exactly on a day-to-day basis do you do, Joe? And I've been the one that's met with him and tried to understand this and tried to see if it's really something that I would be up for, be capable for, and have the interpersonal skills to actually form relationships with administrators and keep these bridges that he has really worked hard to build, and keep those bridges going and let more people cross those. So again, something I've already mentioned and I'm really a proponent for, and that Peter's also agreeing with, is bringing these student group representatives into these rooms. And so that when I meet like on a weekly, monthly basis with these people, that every time we're discussing something, that someone else is there who is very close to these issues, who understands them, so that I'm not the only one representing these voices. And I also think that it's the president's role to be very dynamic and flexible even with these platforms and these ideas, and recognizing that the listening has to keep happening and that there is change and that we have to respond to that immediately and be on the ground talking to friends, talking to peers.
So I have a Jewish mother. And anyone who has a Jewish mother would know they're a little bit resistant to change, to ideas. For example, I had a conversation earlier today with my mom about going abroad. That's not going to happen. I've joked about this with administrators before. Sometimes administration acts in the same way, sort of. They can be very resistant to change. It's comfortable to rest, to stay in the same place, especially when you have alumni who are telling you to keep things the same, who are restricting you with how you can use your money, who are restricting you with how you can act, right? Here's what I will do differently. First of all, we need to have those student groups, leaders of those student groups, meet with us, with administration, because if their voice isn't in the room, that's obviously not going to work out. But second of all, and here's more importantly, this summer, I worked selling AT&T like I mentioned before. You know what was the best way to sell AT&T? It was telling personal stories. It was going up to the door and saying, I love your dog. Forget about this stuff. I don't care, I love your dog. You tell the personal stories that students have been affected by mental health, by students who are gay or different sexual identities, who can't identify with their mental health struggles. I apologize, I didn't hear.
Okay, so now we're going to move to some candidate-specific questions. You'll have a minute and a half for these questions, so 30 seconds shorter than and we're going to start with PJ. In your platform, you talk about creating an online database to collect student information on majors in order to help advise underclassmen. YCC is already in the final stages of building and testing such a platform. So what specifically do you like about the current model, and how would you personally plan to enhance it?
Yeah, this project, I kind of, I guess if you could say, I kind of stole it from Joe, because Joe presented it last spring. What I found really appealing was that so currently, and as Joe presented it, I'm going to kind of repeat his words, I'll kind of add my own opinion to it as well. So the idea is that seniors who are leaving, or even just, it doesn't have to be specifically seniors, it can be juniors, but they can add their perspective on what courses are like, what the professor quality is like, what the resources are like. But I definitely want to improve it in the sense that you can add a whole lot more to the database as well. For example, you can have professor suggestions. It's just adding a lot to it, but definitely, first of all, engaging with the student community, sending out a survey. I didn't personally see it in my inbox. I might have missed it, asking students what they might like to see in such a database. You do have the general framework, right? You have what the major looks like. You have what classes are good to take, but also asking students would they like to learn about fellowship opportunities related to their major? Would they like to know about specific campus initiatives that is related to their major? So definitely learning more about what student groups want, and also meeting with student groups. And so again, it might sound like fluff. I don't want to sound like fluff. Why do I think student groups is related to even the idea of a major? I do think there are a lot of student groups that are not. But for example, if you can make very, very strong relations. If you meet with the Yale Undergraduate Aerospace Association in person, ask them in person, what would you like to see in a major database? Are most of them STEM majors? Probably. Are all of them? Maybe not. But if you meet with the board, you can understand that. There is undergraduate women in sciences at Yale, same thing.
Much of your platform has to do with reforming financial aid. Given the changes already implemented this year, how would you further advocate for students on financial aid given the limited amount of resources? Please discuss the specific policies you would pursue in light of the distinction made between summer and term contributions.
Yeah, so Students Unite Now put out this really awesome report, and I recommend everyone looking it up. It's called Objectively Unfair, which is how the student contribution requirement has been described, because many students are expected to contribute like almost $6,000 every single year, which creates such inequality between the higher income and the lower income students on this campus. And then for summer courses, and I know this doesn't specifically address that, but for summer courses, often financial aid doesn't apply there, and I don't think a lot of people know that. Even for online courses, financial aid often doesn't apply. So it's clearly a priority that the YCC needs to have in terms of where do you actually get this money? Because we can all say like, we need this, but like, where does the money come from? I think we need to be a little more creative about where we look for financial sources and Dick should help me work on this actually, when we were looking for, we were like looking all over Yale for money for sophomore class council stuff because we had such a small budget. We went to the Sportsman Center, we went to the Council of Masters, we went to the Yale College Dean's Office, we went to the Undergraduate Organizations Committee, and we pooled together money from all over Yale because there's money here, it's just hidden in all these different budgets. And I think if we're really thorough and creative, we're gonna be able to find the money to increase financial aid.
So for David, do you want to zero?
Yeah, and I also just want to add something to that in terms of like these limited resources that we're talking about. I think there should be an emphasis on the highest need students because when it really comes down to it, I'm also on financial aid and I have almost full 95% financial aid and I'm working and my parents are helping to get that met. But the highest need students who actually do have to spend everything out of pocket, and they're solely responsible for all the things that they're buying, like a new MacBook. Like, that's something where it's something visibly creating differences within classrooms for someone who like has a broken laptop and can't afford to get it fixed. So I think the majority of resources that are limited that we have need to be directed towards that in more effective ways.
And Vito, several candidates have claimed that they will take measures to resolve conflicts over the date of spring fling, particularly concerning varsity athletic schedules. Given that none of you have served on the spring fling committee, and an overwhelming majority of students have already expressed a preference for the current date of spring fling, what, if anything, do you plan to do the committee has not already done in order to accommodate student athletes?
Okay, so this year there really was a push to get student athlete representatives onto the spring fling committee. And that's something where we need to be aware that even if there's a majority of students who do prefer that Saturday date and who want that to stay in place, that we have to take into account lots of student athletes who can attend, and that's a conversation that we need to keep having with those athlete representatives and trying to find a Friday that'll work. And I know that there's logistical concerns, but I think if we're more open about why exactly that can't happen, instead of having this entire frustrated group of students who thinks that they don't have a say in this, we need to make more clear logistical issues and not make promises to make this completely accessible to everybody, because we have to have better communication and keep working with these groups.
Thank you. Carter, in your platform, you claim that you'll work with the cultural centers and administration to bolster our ethnic studies and cultural resources, or our ethnic studies program and cultural resources. Given the administration's commitment to create a race and ethnicity center and faculty diversity, two initiatives that they're currently working on, what do you hope to specifically pursue apart from this?
Sure, and by the way, I'm free for 12 Wednesday comments, if you want to fit it in. So, to the question, to answer it quite frankly, in all seriousness, you look around at Yale, and we've had these discussions about the mastery title, we've had these discussions about Calhoun College. These are representative of larger problems at Yale that question directly addresses. That problem, you go in a dining hall, you look at the dining hall staff. Take a look at who's the managers, take a look at who the workers is. That's something we would fix. That's something that I've had a conversation with Bob Sullivan about. That's something that you reach out to areas who aren't aware they can get jobs at Yale. You fix problems like that. You fix problems just in the larger Yale community that deal with these problems. For example, the staff at mental health and counseling is not representative of the clients who are going there. And that is an extreme problem when you have someone who wants help with a specific issue and they cannot get help with what they need because the other person doesn't understand. These are things we will work with the cultural centers who are very well versed in these issues, and we will say, okay, who do we approach? How can we approach this? We'll give you the resources as YCC. We'll make the administrative contacts. You'll go with us. You'll sit down. I'll make a few jokes, loosen up the crowd, get everyone laughing. Dean Holloway loves it when I freestyle rap. I'm great, by the way. Just my mom disagrees. But we do this, right? We take this approach, and this is the advocacy approach that I'm trying to preach here. This is you bring light, humor, fun, excitement, but you get stuff done. And YCC is not visible. How many people in here heard something tonight that they did not know about before? Raise your hand.
Carter, you're...
All right, this crowd is tougher than the Yale court.
We only get one vote.
Two. Josh, were the events of last semester to happen again, how would your response be different from that of YCC this year? What specific policy changes would you advocate in order to address these issues, and which administrators would you support?
Yeah. So I think that regarding racial equity, there are a few things we have to focus on, and they generally pertain to supporting the cultural centers more robustly and also expanding ethnic studies. Regarding the cultural centers, I think it's time that we create endowments in these cultural centers, as I mentioned before, so that they're financially independent from the institution, just like YCC now is. I also think it's time that we add more staff to the cultural centers, because oftentimes there's a revolving door in the cultural centers with their deans. But it's time that we have people who are in the cultural centers who are staff to support the deans when they're coming in and they're new. And I've also had conversations with people in the Black Men's Union who have talked about how it might be really useful to have funds from Yale go to the cultural centers for the express purpose of kind of integrating the constituent parts of each cultural center to create a center that has a lot more solidarity. I'd also double down on my push for ethnic studies. I mentioned that I've done advocacy this year to the Dean of Undergraduate Education for Ethnic Studies. One idea that we came up with was kind of really harnessing the power of the new Center for Race and Indigeneity by creating an outgrowth of that center that focuses on ethnic studies. And so I would definitely talk to Dean Schirmeister. I would also talk to Virgil Howard, the Dean of Student Engagement. I'd also probably talk to Hannah Peck, the Director of Student Life. I think these people definitely have a lot to say when it comes to engaging the student body. I know the Dean of Student Engagement has really done tremendous work this year reaching out to members of the cultural centers. I would definitely also talk to the deans of the cultural centers. But I also know that there's limits to what they can do with the administration. But I also think that their power to speak to that should be enhanced.
Great, thank you. And now we're moving to the final segment of the debate, the public questions round. So it looks like we have questions, and unfortunately we can only take 3, so that one up. The candidates will be around after to take questions as well.
Also, feel free to listen to the questions.
We have a MySpace page if you want to check it out.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm really ecstatic to see who's on the stage right now. These guys are really talented and competent, and I hope that regardless of what happens after the election, you guys will continue to be involved with student affairs and I've done big service for the school already. My question is, regarding these big issues like financial aid, the sexual climate at Yale, student income contribution, racial issues, these are big problems that often when you take to the administration, they say, we'll need some time to work it out, we'll need to talk with so-and-so. So these are extended issues that often takes many different YCC years to accomplish. And my question is, a lot of these issues do require a lot of urgency. And what strategy do you guys have to bring urgency to the table? Because in that room with the administrator, they often have the reports, they have the information. What we bring them in terms of information, it's likely that they'll kind of read it over. And Next Yale and groups similar to that, they have invested so much time and emotional energy and effort to bring some urgency to an issue. And often people even think that's not enough. So how do you guys plan on addressing that and bringing urgency to the table?
And you all have 1 minute to answer, and we'll start with Sarah.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of really important issues. I'll use sexual climate just as an example. It's something I'm really passionate about. There are short-term things we can do that can happen really quickly that'll totally improve something like sexual climate at Yale. There's a Share Center. We can create an anonymous live chat for Share so that if you're a survivor and you want to reach out anonymously and not have repercussions, you can do that. The UWC, with the university-wide committee, they deal with the sexual assaults and how much time do I have? 30. Oh, okay. The UWC has no accountability, and so we need an oversight body to keep them accountable so that victims don't have to advocate for themselves if their deadlines keep getting pushed back. Like, there's things that can be really implementable, and I think if we have the people who are close to the issues, people who are outspoken about sexual assault on campus and have experienced it, and they're in the meetings with the administrators, the administration are real people and they care about the students. I know we think of them as an ominous body, but they will listen.
Okay, thank you for asking that. Asking that, David. I think this has 2 components to it. One is being in a room with these administrators alongside the representatives that I'm proposing to bring with me and always having someone there. I think it's very important. There's a lot to be said about having someone who can actually speak from personal experience about these issues on racial diversity, on student income, and having myself even convey this sort of emotional urgency. And I think it is important to have a presence and have conviction and be an effective communicator, but I think there's a lot to be said about having that emotional urgency. And 2, again, like Sarah's saying, on the groundwork, for example, bringing PLs and making them a bigger part of residential colleges because they're already set up like that, but giving them legitimacy with even other administrators like masters and deans so that they're there with the FROCOs, they're in those meetings so that students don't always have to wait for these big changes. They can see that happening every day.
Wall Street, that's the problem. No, but in all seriousness, guys, I'm going to make this super simple because everything they said was 100% right. But here's a big thing that I want to announce today because we finally got approval to make sure we can do it next year. We are going to take a coordinated approach. I'm huge in video production, for those of you who know me, editing videos and acting on screen. And we are going to do a highlighted approach that showcase individualized stories that people have been affected. I'm going to make this issue really simple. In everything they just talked about, we're dealing with people. We're dealing with people and we're trying to persuade them. That's all this is, guys. We are going to make videos that very clearly, more effectively than a report, will show people on camera, will show people conveying emotion, will show people conveying stories, will be powerful. Now, I'm not saying this is going to change everything and that they'll react immediately. There are hurdles we're going to have to overcome. This is natural. But this is the approach YCC needs to take. We've hardly utilized video as a social media outreach platform. And that's what we have to do. That will be crucial. And I promise you we're going to do it and we're going to have a good time doing it. It'll be the best.
The first thing we should do is, as YCC, we should be helping to facilitate and organize some conversations. When I was talking to USAY yesterday, one thing they brought up was that a lot of the people who are holding these conversations, it takes a lot of emotional labor for them to not just talk about their experiences, but also organize these events. YCC should be doing that to kind of get the conversation going. Also, I know from my advocacy to administrators that oftentimes one thing that really gets them going is telling them that they're behind the 8 ball compared to other universities. Oftentimes saying other institutions have done this, we should too, really works. We also need to get activists in the room. And talking to the head of the Asian American Studies Task Force, one thing that became apparent to me was that they were meeting with sometimes the wrong administrators, like the Dean for Faculty Diversity, when talking about creating a major. We should get the right administrators in the room with the right activists. And YCC also should just not be skeptical of signing on to activist petitions. There's no reason that YCC should not have signed on to the financial aid at Yale petition on that website. I think we should be partnering with activist groups by doing stuff like that and not be skeptical of kind of integrating ourselves with the activist community at Yale.
I do agree with Sarah's approach that there are long-term goals that are focused on policy and there are short-term goals focused on programming. And again, for the long-term policy, I do agree with you that we do need to create a sense of urgency. I do agree with Carter, you can use video or what Talk said, you can just talk to administrators about what other colleges have done. But so I kind of want to use financial aid as a way to look at it. So for example, in financial aid, I would personally approach the University Budget Committee, understand what the actual implications are from drawing funds from other departments, as Carter mentioned, but understanding if there are any departments that are overfunded, if we can move funds there. If that isn't feasible to move funds from other departments, I do want to look at working with the Development Office of Yale to create a fundraising initiative, because I'm sure there are alumni, once they graduate, who were on financial aid, who want to donate to this cause of helping to reduce the social income contribution, as Yale is looking at other ways to redistribute funds. That's a long-term policy. In terms of short-term programming, I think we can just increase the number of jobs on campus. And I say just not because it's simple, but you can increase jobs in places that students care about, for example, research positions with law professors or science professors.
Yeah, Carter, this is the last one.
Sure, so I'd like to rebuttal that. One of the big issues I tried looking into was how we're gonna increase jobs. Because guys, I need money. So if you'd like, there's a GoFundMe, invest in Carter. Good guy. But the one thing I found is, especially with research, I met with the Yale Undergraduate Research Association. Guys, their fellowships, their research, their mentorship, it's been cut. And quite frankly, the administration has deprioritized. We just saw they defunded the Climate and Energy Institute. That's unacceptable because Yale is pioneering that, and that's something that Yale should have stood proud on and say, we're going to separate this from our geology department, we're going to devote resources to it, and we're going to help people find summer internships and get labs. That's important. Why is that not a main issue on this stage? These are conversations we need to be having, and Peter's absolutely right that we need to have funding, we need to find that, but it's not so simple. And that's something that student voice is needed for.
So
Could you repeat your question, Joe? Sorry.
Yeah. Everybody in this room right now is a resident of the city of New Haven. So my question to the candidates is, what should the relationship between Yale University and the rest of the city of New Haven be, and where does YCC fit into that?
And we're going to start with Diksha, and in the interest of time, your responses are limited to 45 seconds.
Thank you for asking this question. This is something that I'm really dedicating myself to this year in YCC, and trying to understand from two perspectives. In what ways do Yaleys want to engage with New Haven? Because we have to start off with the assumption that Yaleys aren't malicious. We don't want to actively not be part of a city because we think it's horrible, right? And so really trying to gauge interest from Yaleys on in what ways would connections be meaningful, even just outside of community service, because those opportunities are there. and also connecting with New Haven residents and New Haven leaders and trying to see in what ways would engagement from Yale be meaningful. And I think some key points that I've identified are food, theater, and actual organizations within the two communities interacting.
We are part of New Haven. We own 55% of their property. But besides that, you're right. So in all seriousness, what we need to do with New Haven is we need to create a separate task force and a separate group that's going to separately deal with New Haven. And I read over Dixa's proposal, and it's some great ideas there. I'm part of, a lot of you know me from ACLU. I'm the co-president of ACLU. So we've done a lot of work with the community, and I was the employment director for No Closed Doors. So I was personally responsible with meeting with many people in the New Haven community and meeting with many people who are unemployed and who are going through these hardships. That was a tremendous experience that most Yaleys don't go through, because most Yaleys don't want to venture out in the city, or at least don't want to tell their parents that they're venturing off campus into the city. That's something that we got to fix, and we did a little bit on a project this year that kind of would possibly do like a week in the beginning. We need to do more on that.
Thanks, Jacob, for the question. You definitely have a lot of accountability on that. When I give tours of the admissions office, one of the things I really enjoy doing is starting off by saying that my objective is to show that Yale is an optimal place to study, but that also New Haven is an optimal place to live. And I try to emphasize that you are a resident of the city and not just a student at the university. I engage in the city through VITA and through a mentorship program. And so I really understand the importance of being a respectful resident in the city. And there are two things that I would say to answer your question, Jacob. The first is that I think the Focus program should really be expanded to be on par with FOOT, to be on par with CC. Really one of the foundational parts of our pre-orientation program. And the second thing is that we have to really restructure that first meeting that we have, the safety meeting. And make it not just the safety meeting, but the New Haven meeting. Bring in Mayor Tony Hart and talk about how we can be respectful citizens, not just be secure.
Peter?
So currently Yale has a website called Life in New Haven. It's a very well-built website. It shows you where to go for food. It shows you where to go for specific activities. It shows you events in the city. The issue is not many students use it. So first of all, I would like to explore why students don't use the website, how we can improve the access of students to that website. Additionally, I would like to work with Dwight Hall, especially the Student Executive Board, and also connect with the Department of Arts, Culture, and Tourism in New Haven to understand more about specific programs in the city that might appeal to students. Another caveat that I would like to make is I don't only want to increase student participation in New Haven, because that's like us going out there and coming back into New Haven. So we are part of New Haven, but New Haven isn't part of Yale. I think that's a little weird relationship. I do think we need to improve and increase public events at Yale available to the New Haven residents.
Sarah?
New Haven's awesome. My biggest involvement in the city freshman year, I did a program through Dwight Hall where every weekend I went to a different part of New Haven and did some kind of service initiative or just hung out with the community, and so I got to see all different parts of New Haven, which was really exciting, and I got to learn the city really well. That's a very atypical experience of a Yale student though, which is really interesting. I met with Dwight Hall. They want to be formally incorporated into the structure of YCC, especially because those 90 Dwight Hall member organizations know New Haven the best. So I would be really excited about making Dwight Hall a legitimate member of YCC and working directly with their council for New Haven engagement.
Great. Last question? Yeah.
With the exception for the asking a specific question about student athletes, none of the candidates have mentioned students. Students make up for 15% of Yale. This year there have been multiple teams to win the Ivy League. There's one team to have won the national championship. Our Yale men's basketball team made it to the tournament for the first time in over 60 years and knocked out Baylor. I'm wondering what the candidates have done to understand the student athlete experience at Yale and how they see students fitting in the Yale community and what they think they can do to improve this.
We can go down the line again, starting with Carter. Reminder, 45 seconds.
Sure. So I have a lot of experience on this because I was a football player in high school. But I did speak with Spencer, I spoke with some other athletes in the football team, I spoke with the entire women's basketball team, I went around and spoke to all the athlete groups, and this was the sort of common perception I have. One, I'll boil it down to simple issues. One is they have limited time, and in a lot of ways, Yale doesn't accommodate their time. This is difficult. For example, the dining plan, guys, is very difficult if you're an athlete. My roommate right there eats all the time. He leaves his food everywhere. He needs a place where he can dedicate it, go to dining. Harvard has much more flexible dining hall options for athletes. Kevin has done tremendous work in the dining hall task force report. You'll see that we are looking into options for athletes in that specific area. I could go on, but they're cutting me out.
Throughout this debate, we've talked a lot about engaging students, and Max, you're a member of YSAC. This year as Academic Policy Director, I have met with the president of YSAC, Caroline Lynch, very frequently. We've stayed in touch. And what we've talked about, there are a few things that I think we really need to do to help student athletes. The first is that we need to modify our class schedules so that there are more lectures in the morning and fewer during the time period in which a lot of student athletes go to practice. The second is that we have to create an option when you're enrolling in sections for if you have an unchangeable previously scheduled mandatory conflict, i.e. athletic practice, you don't have to enroll in a section that is extremely not optimal for you. We also have to really enhance the tracking mechanism that we use to reward students for going to athletic games. Right now, the threshold for the first reward you get is like 5,000 points. We should definitely lower that threshold and encourage more students to go to games.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. I would like to say that just as student council changes every year, YCC, I think YSAC also changes composition, if I'm correct, every single year. I feel like every single year you have new priorities. I do want to again stress the fact that as student government, we only have 1 year to achieve a lot of the things that we would like to see happen for athletes. I understand there are a lot of issues. For example, science majors cannot take labs sometimes that they would like to take. Again, going back to what Carter said about dining. And also you just have generally, basically athletes have a very complicated schedule. But I would first of all like to meet next year with the new YSAC because they have their own concerns. I think they may have different priorities based off of the new composition. Understand what their priorities are and focus all our efforts, leveraging our resources on one project so that we don't stretch ourselves too thin and don't accomplish anything.
Can I rebuttal that real quick?
No, you don't have to rebuttal yourself.
I'm sorry to hear you say that.
I actually made athletic representation a big part of my policy platform, if you want to look it up. But I think it's really unfortunate that athletes work really hard at the school and they're supposed to be here because they're students also. But there's kind of this sentiment that athletes aren't as important in the academic sphere here. I am especially concerned about athletic mental health, and there's recently a town hall on this, but athletes get left out of the conversation all the time, whether it's pushing for important policy like mental health or planning events like spring fling. They're 11% of the population, but they have no representation in student government, and I think it's really important that we focus on these groups that are underrepresented both in student government and generally at Yale, and look at our policies and how they're affecting them specifically.
I agree with a lot of sentiments that are already said on the stage, and I think a big part is really not just treating student athletes as a completely separate part of the university, but integrating and tailoring every step of reform that we do have and like the different initiatives that we do have, like in mental health, like in all the academic reforms and financial aid, and really making sure that because these people, like my roommate last year was on the swim team, STEM major, I literally never saw her. And the reason why she felt so disconnected from this community is because she just isn't present and doesn't have the time to because she has so many other commitments. So making sure that we do have a student athlete committee that's always a representative that's always in the YCC meeting so that they have a say in all these different other issues too that can be tailored to them.
Great, let's give a hand to our presidential candidate.